To continue our conversation, we bring back in General Michael Hayden. General Hayden, it's always great to talk to you. Now, as we shift our attention to what's taking place now in the Middle East, it was curious to hear these reports about Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi being wounded, that this kind of would spread so fast. What was your initial reaction when you heard of this?
Yeah, John, my initial reaction was skepticism. I mean, the initial reports came out of Baghdad, supposedly from the Baghdad intelligence service, the Iraqi intelligence service. It had all the air about it of, rumors on the Arab street. So I'd wait a while to see if we find some evidence here.
But it also, at the same time, it did not seem like the Obama administration did a lot to tamp these down. I mean, I know they have some interest in keeping this pretty obscure here, but what was your response to the way the Obama administration handled these rumors?
Well, I think they don't know either. And even if they did have intelligence, and John, I don't know that, but even if they did have intelligence, this kind of intelligence, so precise, one particular human being, is a pretty heavy lift. So at a minimum, they don't want to oversell this until they are very, very sure.
And we're seeing the video that everybody's pretty much come to associate with Baghdadi, his public appearance, but yet has not been seen in the public eye in any way, shape, or form really between that. Obviously very calculated. We want to turn our attention to another report here. The Khorasan group, we've mentioned them before. They were also targeted by airstrikes in Syria, but supposedly they're trying to broker a merger between ISIS and the al-Nusra Front, which of course is an offshoot of al-Qaeda in Syria.
Yeah, they really are, and I don't give it a high probability of success. I mean, ISIS takes its identity from not being al-Qaeda. I mean, it's a little flippant to put it this way, John, but compared to ISIS, al-Qaeda looks like your grandfather's terrorist organization. And you don't want a real perverse effect from your two questions in this segment. If we have killed Baghdadi, it actually might make the likelihood of a merger of these two groups slightly more rather than less likely. And so in that measure, his death could actually make some aspects of the problem worse.
So there is a case to be made for actually keeping Baghdadi alive if the opportunity did present itself to take him out.
Nah, I wouldn't call it a case. I would just say that would be an unfortunate side effect. I mean, getting Baghdadi off the battlefield, because frankly, he is a rock star in the terrorist movement. So getting him off the battlefield, making him a memory rather than a presence, would be a net positive.
All right, and as we talk about the prospect of this merger, which you don't think are very likely, but let's just say they are for the sake of argument here, what does this do to the Free Syrian Army and the Syrian rebels there that we're counting on to push back?
Yeah, it takes a plan of action. We had, John, it probably never had much more than a moderate or low probability of success, and makes the probability of success even less, maybe close to zero. Because if those two gang up on whatever is left of the Free Syrian Army, there's not much Free Syrian Army left for us to support. And frankly, John, just to be a bit critical here, that's a product of our being so late to this party.
Yes, and that is a situation that certainly is there's more and more evidence to that fact that we were just way late to the game here. One last thing we want to talk about quickly, General, before we have to go for another commercial break here, is a report from this past weekend that's saying ISIS has found a new home in Egypt after jihadists there pledged their allegiance to that terror group. Now, is this ISIS establishing themselves like they did in Raqqa, Syria, where they have offices and patrol the streets, or is this ISIS, as in a bunch of guys watching footage on YouTube and making a video and saying, we're now ISIS?
Well, an awful lot of groups around the world for the last decade or so wanted that Al-Qaeda brand, because it allowed them to punch above their weight. It gave them respectability. Put another way, John, you could have a nondescript hamburger stand, or you could be at McDonald's. You could be part of a larger franchise.
And that's where that flag comes.
Now most of those groups don't want to be associated with Al-Qaeda. They want to be associated with ISIS.
Well, they want to be the new thing, General. As you referenced before, it's like your grandfather's version of terrorism. We got to say goodbye to you, General Michael Hayden. Thanks so much for being with us here on America's Forum.
Thanks.
All right, much more to come here. We're going to talk a little bit about Obamacare right after this.